What's up, everyone? Bryan here from Xact IT Solutions. Welcome to another edition of Guess Who Got Hacked and Attacked this week. This is our YouTube video series that we get into all the attacks that happened to businesses in the last week that end up in the news. We always talk about this. Only about 10% of the attacks that actually happen end up in the news. So don't think that these happen to just the big companies, because the big companies are usually under a lot of regulation or they have to report this stuff, where small businesses, they really don't need to report things when they get attacked unless it affects certain things. At the end of the day, you really do need to report this stuff. It's just that most people don't do it. They don't feel like they're big enough, or they don't feel like it's necessary. But the reality of it is that when you get attacked and you have something like a ransomware attack in your business, you're supposed to disclose that to not only the customers or the people whose data was affected, whether that's employees or customers or vendors, but you're also, in most states, you're supposed to notify at least the authorities, at least the police or something like that, your state attorney general or the FBI, depending on how severe and how much money was involved in the whole entire event. So that's what this series is about. Our channel is about cybersecurity. And if you like anything you see here, please remember to hit that like button. It helps us greatly. And if you're so inclined, please subscribe to our channel. So without further ado, let's jump into this week's content of who got hacked and attacked this week. All right, so Kmart, number one on the list. The big retail giant, you see it up here on the screen. Kmart was allegedly struck by an egregor ransomware attack. Now, we know a lot about egregor. We've talked about them before on this channel. They are the ones that deploy ransomware and typically steal the data when they do so. And that enables them to deploy a technique called double extortion. Double extortion is when the initial attack of ransomware usually doesn't provide any monetary gains for the attackers, meaning you don't pay them because your files were locked. Maybe you had good backups. Maybe you had a good disaster recovery plan in place to prevent any damage from a ransomware type event. So what they've done is altered their tactics. We see it a lot in 2020, where they steal the data first, then deploy the ransomware. When you tell them, oh, we're not going to pay you, they say, well, hold on, let me leak this little bit of information out to the dark web. Let me send you a link to it and instructions on how to look at it and prove to you that I stole your data. And I'm going to release a little bit more and a little bit more as time moves on, and you don't pay me the amount that I'm asking you for. That's what Kmart is dealing with here. And it says that the attack did not shut down Kmart's website, but it's said to have affected the 88.sears.com, which is a human resource website operated by Kmart's parent company, Transformco. So that's really important here because it's an HR website, which means that they're going to have information about Kmart Sears employees in this data dump that they probably stole. So retail organizations, it goes on to say that retail organizations have to be vigilant for cyber attacks in the run up to Christmas, which is absolutely true. I've talked about this on the channel before. Ransomware attackers will go after industries and entities that they see. If they see a spike in business during a certain time of year, or like with COVID, they go after COVID manufacturers or people involved with COVID, because they know that in a pinch of time, if there's no other viable alternative solution to the problem that they're facing, which could be ransomware, they're more likely to pay it just to get away from the issue and continue to conduct business. The article goes on to say that taking the appropriate preventative steps is critical, but you have to prepare for the worst case by developing and practicing a complete scorched earth disaster recovery plan that minimizes downtime of mission critical systems. And not only that, you need to know what to do when you're in the midst of an issue. When an attack happens, your mind gets cloudy, it gets confused, decision making is not as good, your ability to recall information is not as good. That's why it's imperative to have stuff documented and written down so that when the event actually occurs, you're not struggling to remember how to do something, or how to what password is for what, or how do I access something, or you may completely forget about something altogether, which just makes the whole situation a lot worse. So have a disaster recovery plan in place, and then also test the disaster recovery plan. So if you are unfortunately attacked, that attack is not the first time you're going through that plan. So we hope the best for Kmart. We'll follow up on this to let you know how it goes. But it looks like Kmart, unfortunately, is one of our victims on our segment this week. The next one we're going to look at is a Pennsylvania county. They just paid $500,000 to criminals. It was Delaware County. It's a suburb of Philadelphia. And on Monday, Delaware County disclosed that they had taken portions of their computer network offline after discovering that their network was compromised. It goes on to say that the County of Delaware recently discovered a disruption to portions of its computer network, and that they commenced an immediate investigation that included taking certain systems offline and working with a computer forensic specialist to determine the nature and scope of the event. They go on to say that they're working diligently to restore the functionality of the systems. Local media has stated that the ransomware operators had access to the network containing police reports, payroll, purchasing, and other databases. As part of the attack, the threat actors demanded a $500,000 ransom to receive the decryptor. Bleeping Computer reported that the ransomware gang advised Delaware County to change all of their passwords and modify their Windows domain configuration to include safeguards from the MIMCATS program. MIMCATS is a program that can be used to exploit various things. One of them is Active Directory. There are a lot of Active Directory exploits that have been recognized in the past year. All of them have been patched. This is evidence here that obviously Delaware County did not have somebody looking after their systems well enough to know that they had a system vulnerable to something like MIMCATS. And what MIMCATS was able to do was break into the AD and basically, every password in their Active Directory, that means every user account on their computer networks, password was known at that point. Kudos to the to the criminals for actually offering up some advice. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the business practice here, but at least somebody's giving them some advice so they don't get hit again. So moving on this week, we also have K12 Online schooling giant pays the Ryuk ransom to stop a data leak. Now, K12 is an online education company, and it goes on to say that they paid the ransom after they were hit with Ryuk in the middle of November. The K12 announced that they suffered a ransomware attack in mid-November that caused them to lock down some of their IT systems to prevent the attack spread. In November, they detected unauthorized activity on their networks, which has since been confirmed as a criminal attack in the form of ransomware. Upon identifying unusual system activity, we quickly initiated our response, taking steps to contain the threat and lock down impacted systems. They notified federal law enforcement authorities, and they're working with industry-leading third-party forensics teams to investigate and assist with the incident. They have already worked with their cyber insurance provider to make a payment to the ransomware attacker, as a proactive and preventative step to ensure that the information obtained by the attacker from the systems will not be released on the internet or otherwise disclosed, which was probably part of why they paid it, because they were probably under the threat of having this information released, even if they tried to not pay it through ransomware and recover from backups. The interesting thing is that the things that I'm covering this week, we've noticed 2 cases now where it said that the insurance company has paid the ransom. That's a lot of money, number one, that an insurance company is having to pay out. But it also explains why everybody's saying, oh, my cyber insurance doubled this year. My cyber insurance tripled this year. I couldn't even get cyber insurance this year because they said we don't do things well enough. These are all things that we're hearing out in the marketplace, and it's all because people don't take cybersecurity seriously enough. And I don't know how I feel about all these insurance companies stepping up and paying these cyber criminals to get these businesses out of these jams, because it only empowers the cyber criminals to do more, to figure out more ways to do more harm to people that don't deserve it. The practice of paying these criminal hackers needs to go away, needs to stop. And I think, in 5 years, the behavior that we see today is probably going to stop. But at the end of the day, we have to start now. We have to start shoring up cybersecurity. It has to get better. It's becoming an issue of national security when private businesses do not secure their environments, especially if they're in the business of supplying any sort of services or product to our government. There's a lot of private businesses that not only provide services to the private space, but they also provide it to the federal government. And a lot of times those businesses intermingle their networks and their computing, and there's no real physical or logical separation of the two businesses and how they and what they do. And then one company gets hacked through the private side, and now we cause a problem for maybe a government entity or a government contract that you have with maybe the Department of Defense or the FDA or something like that. And now those organizations can become a victim because of your lack of security within your own business. So moving right along, we have Baltimore County in Maryland. They are recovering from a ransomware attack. And interestingly enough with this one, state audits have routinely found security problems in the school districts in this county. And the article goes on to say that even with a dramatic shift in cybersecurity, or even with the dramatic shift in the knowledge that there are all these cybersecurity threats out there, cybersecurity has not been a priority for the education sector. And if you follow this channel, you know that that's true because I cover K-12 attacks constantly. Leaders are making decisions without a security mindset. The school systems lack resources and support they need to adequately manage security and the security risks. And many districts are not even required to meet any kind of cybersecurity guidelines. And this is true throughout the country. There's a lot of people who are after the dollars of your school districts and your K through 12 schools. Obviously, somewhere that money comes from somewhere in the form of tax dollars. Most states, it's usually through property taxes. There's only so much of that pie to go around. And there's a lot of people with their hands in that pie. And cybersecurity just happens to not be one of the things that schools are spending money on right now. I'm sure they're spending money on things that are what they view as more important than cybersecurity. However, when it starts to affect the delivery of school services, that is going to draw the ire of the people who are paying those tax bills. And it's going to force these districts to actually do something. So they have two choices: reallocate the money to cybersecurity and cut it from somewhere else, or go ask, for a property tax increase so they can cover these things. The article goes on to state that there are reports throughout the country where state auditors have documented poor protection of sensitive personal data, lack password management, lack of information recovery plans, where we see that all over the place, even in private businesses, and other problems with cybersecurity, and it's all highlighted in this article right here. Moving right along, we have a global HR firm giant, Randstad, has taken a hit from cyber criminals using the Windows egregor ransomware. With the company saying it's trying, it's trying to figure out what data the attackers have stolen and placed on their form on the dark web. They have leaked a zip file that contains about 38 megs of information, and they're waiting for the company to approach them for ransom discussions. Randstad is a huge company, and they have about $2.3 billion in revenue in euros. They're just a massive company. And just think the kind of information a human resources company would have for all of their clients, basically all their employee information, payroll information, health insurance information, social security numbers, tax information, things like that. That could be trouble if this stuff gets out on the dark web. So this is why cybersecurity and taking care of your data that you're entrusted with by your clients is extremely, extremely important. And then we have another one. Metro Vancouver Transit System up in Canada confirms a ransomware attack. They say payment data secure, which is good. But they said that TransLink CEO Kevin Desmond says in a statement that the transit authority is conducting a comprehensive forensic investigation to determine how the incident occurred and what information may have been affected. Now look, if you get attacked, there's always going to be forensic investigations occurring. It's commonplace. I think this is like the third or fourth article in this video that I've mentioned a forensic investigation. Well, they had to figure out how they got in. Even if you do everything that you can to prevent somebody from getting in, if they do get in, a forensic investigation has to happen. This is why investing in cybersecurity and cybersecurity insurance is important, because you're going to have to pay somebody to do that forensic investigation. And not only that, you're going to have to dedicate members of your team to help get access to these things. It's going to take away from their core function of running your business while they're taking time out of their day to help people get access to things and look at things and help people just get through things. So it's like a double-edged sword when you get attacked, because not only do you have to pay outside people to come in, but you have to pay your own people to not do work for you, but to deal with the issue at hand. And we see this constantly. When we look at a company's a network and we do an assessment on their business, we are constantly looking at all the costs that are involved when it comes to some kind of an attack or event. How much you're going to pay a public relations firm, how much you're going to pay for credit monitoring, how much you're going to pay for maybe the fact that the record was even compromised in the first place. And if you're under HIPAA or financial reporting regulations, these things come into play where you pay per record if there's a breach or some kind of reportable breach or incident that occurs to the data that you are entrusted with. So it's important to know this stuff, because not a lot of people do, and a lot of people think, oh, I'll just pay the ransom if I ever get hit. Well, there's other costs that go along with just paying the ransom that you're going to have to deal with. Hopefully I've highlighted that to you in this video. So here we go. Bad vibes. So we're going to wrap it up with this one. Experts warn of sex toy cyber threat. Now here we go. I've mentioned this before. I haven't mentioned sex toys, but I've mentioned coffee makers, TVs, cameras, baby monitors, you name it. Apologize for all the noises, but here we go. Security flaw in smart sex toys. A security vulnerability was discovered in a smart chastity belt. It was discovered before hackers could exploit it, but it was labeled in this article as a painful flaw, for example. ESET goes on to say that we can't talk about the implications of an attack on a sexual device without also reassessing the significance of sexual abuse in the context of digital transformation that society is going through. So it brings up a good point. How will this be treated in the future if it becomes more prevalent, or if it happens, more in the future? Will this be on the same level as things like rape? And will people be charged with sexual crimes if they decide to hack into something like a chastity belt or some other sex toy and do something with that toy or manipulate it in a way that somebody was not expecting? It brings up a huge point, but it also highlights that anything that you connect to the internet is susceptible to some kind of hack. And that's what's important here, to understand that every device that you connect to Wi-Fi or plug into your network can be hacked. And you need to know when there's vulnerabilities on those devices, and if they're not being updated anymore, stop using them, or apply the latest update that you got from the manufacturer. So I hope this video was informative to you all, and it was thought-provoking. If you have any questions, you have any comments, especially about the last one there, drop them in the comment section below. Remember to like our video, subscribe to our channel. If you want to work with my company, or you just want to find out what we're about, head over to our website, xitx.com. Reach out to us, hit the contact us button at the top right. Fill out the form, let us know what's on your mind. Someone will reach out to you with whatever your concerns are. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you guys on the other side. Take care.